Welcome to Jewish Cinémathèque, where we meet some of the important faces involved with films that tackle aspects of the Jewish experience. Today I'm joined by writer and director Moshe Rosenthal, whose film Tell Me Everything premiered at the Sundance Film Festival, where it was a nominee for the Grand Jury Prize. Tell Me Everything is also opening the Jerusalem Film Festival and was the closing night selection at the Meyerson JCC Israel Film Center Festival in New York. The film is based on Rosenthal's own recollections, where as a child of 6 in the late 1980s, as the AIDS epidemic was spreading, he remembered lying in bed next to his 2 sisters and quietly and secretly praying that he was not going to die of AIDS. Rosenthal explores the intense feelings of a kid facing the perceived horrors of adulthood and the coming of age.
גבירותיי ורבותיי, קבלו את חתן בר המצווה בועז.
באישון לילה ברחובות ריקים פוסע לאט בין הבתים הפנים חתומות הקלפים חזקים הוא משחק פוקר את תוך החיים איש זר, הכיוון לא ידוע צפי מהמשחק לפני שהוא מכה קלף חזק, יש לו קלף חזק הוא חותר לבוא יש לו קלף חזק קלף חזק
משהו, איזה יופי. כל הכבוד.
אז אפשר שנעשה את זה בבר מצווה של בועז?
This is Moshe Rosenthal's second feature film, his debut film Karaoke, featuring Sasson Gabay, premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival and won Best Debut Film and Audience Award at the Jerusalem Festival. It was nominated for 14 Ophir Awards and won 4, including for Best Actor and Actress. Previous to that, he contributed short segments to several films. He's a graduate of the Steve Tisch School of Film and Television at Tel Aviv University. Moshe, welcome to Jewish Cinémathèque.
Thank you for having me.
It's quite an accomplishment to be at Sundance, especially as an Israeli filmmaker. Can you talk a little bit about that experience, premiering it at Sundance?
I think I got used to the idea that Sundance is not going to happen for an Israeli film in 2026. It's been 10 years since the last feature, fiction film in a competition from Israel. So you almost, you submit your film, but you don't even imagine that something like that could happen. And it's funny how sometimes when you give up on some dreams, then they come true and you kind of have to remember how it felt to dream them so you could fulfill that promise you made to the kid that you were. And yeah, it was definitely a great experience. Surprisingly, it was very non-political, very accepting. But you always feel the tension, and I think there's a lot of it's already it's internalized that aspect of being worried about how you be treated as an Israeli film. And
isn't that awful that that's today's world?
Of course. but I think that the next step is to ask yourself, how do you deal with it, and what's the most graceful way to deal with it. And I think you would see some protests, you would see some people. I gotta say, in Sundance, I felt like it was only in the tension that was more in the subtext. It's the introducing yourself and your country, and then not having any follow-up question. It's the awkward smile. It's small things. But yeah, it's difficult. But I think that the way to approach it, and I think that it was very clear from the beginning that my film is very non-political, and my approach was to just to not allow it to be politicized, and in a way to give an example of what I love in film and what I love in filmmakers, that they are above that, and what they are selling is kind of like the charm of being,
a terrific storyteller.
A storyteller, a citizen of the world, a person that could empathize with everybody. And in that way, it felt to me just very refreshing to be there and to be, proud to be Israeli without speaking about politics. Proud to be Israeli with just, looking good and dressing up well. Proud to be Israeli with just presenting a personal good film and good filmmaking. And in a way, insisting on talking about storytelling, about filmmaking, about our personal connection to these type of stories. Just trying to fight by making the political discussion just not relevant and not cool. Which for me, and I know that people would say that every film is political, and I get that approach. But for me, I think that the moment that you put your agendas in your writing, that you put your ideology in your writing, it's not good. It's never work for me. As for some people it works. I think that it might be true that every work of art is political, but you need to be somewhat. You need to get there in a more subconscious way than to hit people with the.
Hit them over the head.
Hit them over the head with that.
Your first film dealt with relationships, largely marriage relationships, and this film is really father-son in large part. And it's a memory film. It's something that you took in part from your childhood. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I mean, I think that till this point in my filmmaking, I've been strangely mixing some of my autobiography with fiction. I guess there's something really great for a filmmaker to take his personal story, but then change something. The what if of my life. What would have happened in my life? What would have happened to my parents if they met this neighbor, in karaoke? What would have happened to, and with Tell Me Everything, it was what would have happened to my family if kind of the roles of myself and my father were flipped. Because I came out as a gay man to my father, 15 years ago.
During a period where you could come out as a gay man.
Yeah, and we had a complex experience in our, it was a phase of our relationship dealing with it.
He had a lot of problems with it.
No, he accepted it, but I know that it was hard to him, and it's not about the problems and it's not about the conflicts. It's what happens when the differences between you become a quiet conflict. And you can't really approach it because there's not a problem, but there's this distance. And that feeling felt so interesting to me, and I thought, I should really make a film about that untold tension. But when I thought about telling it like as a true biography and really talking about my relationship with my father, it felt kind of like generic coming out story, and I wasn't interested in that. But the moment that I thought about what would happen if it was, if the roles were reversed,
At a different time.
at a different, if if it wasn't me that came out as gay, I mean, if it was me, but if I was at the time of my father, because I'm also a very conservative person in a general sense, so I know that if I was, in my 30s in the 80s, I would be married and having a family. I think that it would be very hard for me to make the choices that I made, in my era, if I was, 30
Yeah,
years back.
it's incredible how Israeli society has changed so dramatically.
Yeah.
Where today a gay man can be very comfortable in most of Israel, or at least certainly in the Tel Aviv area. But in the 80s,
yeah.
it was...
It's almost, it's unbelievable how like something could shift so drastically, so fast.
So tell me how you constructed this story. I mean, some of it was, as I mentioned, memory, and then you created this fiction and you flipped it. So all of a
Yeah.
sudden the gay man is the father.
Yeah, I mean, it's the moment that I started asking myself these questions of if you tell a story about a young boy having to grow up, trying to become a man and trying to understand what masculinity means and what's being a man or being a father means, while his role model is suddenly put under this like suddenly you can see the cracks of what he presents himself to be. And sexuality is part of it, and it's almost like a tool that I use in the film, but I think it's much broader than that. I think it's about our role as men in a general sense, because he's also he's a failed provider. The film begins when he's maybe like a very charming man, the father, but he also loses his business. So it's about like seeing your father and seeing kind of like the cracks of that image of what a father's supposed to be, and how do you come of age while understanding those ideas. And I think for me it was the sexuality part was very relevant also because it's I guess it's has a lot to do with my own personal conflicts. But I think like it's very, the idea of masculinity is eventually a very fragile thing, and there's like beautiful and important part to hold, but there's also things that can become toxic over the years. And I think that it mainly it was an exploration of this dynamic.
Israeli society in general is a macho, masculine-oriented society. A little less so today, but it certainly was the case in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, and then the idea of like trying to pretend to fit in was very, was very interesting to me. The idea of the father having to hold this role and carry this role for himself, for the family, for his son, and also the fact that the boy tries to become that type of man, and what it does to you, because through the film we see how the more gentle sides of the boy, like his love of his sister's pop music or his love of dancing, is slowly pushed aside to a more aggressive, macho, attitude towards life, and eventually his connection is reconnecting with his father through reconnecting to the more soft sides in his personality.
Did you feel that yourself, having two sisters?
Oh, for sure. I grew up with a very dominant mother that had a beauty salon inside our apartment.
So that story is very real.
Yes, I told you, like, it's very autobiographical except the story, it's just the world. And my two older sisters, we lived in the same room, so I was surrounded by like images of like pop, pop idols all over the world, and I think that in a way, I don't know if I was realizing what I was going through, but I think I resisted that feminine influence. I think that it was very important for me to find a way towards my masculinity. And my father was, a military man, so most of the time he wasn't at home, and he also represented this like ultra masculine, persona.
The Chayal.
Yeah, the Katzin, the general. So for me, it was really important to kind of like find a way to earn my masculinity and not allow my sisters and my mother, make me a part of their like poppy pink world,
There's a wonderful scene where you take the barbells and you wrap them.
He wraps them in black tape.
Yeah, can you? Is that something that actually happened to you as a child?
I'm not sure if specifically that, but I remember taking my sisters. How do you call them? Like
barbells or weights.
And trying to put on some muscle as like a 6-year-old, So that was probably something I took from real life, but yeah, I think it also made me, in a way, you talk about like Israel society as like a very macho place. I grew up in a world where the women were in control, and most of the time I think it's still what's secretly happening, and I think it's actually like it made me be a bit more interested in exploring fragile masculinity, because I always see it as something that is like much more fragile than the female experience.
So you say in your own home you had a very strong mother, and yet who's your dad? He's not, he's a soldier. He's a katzin. He's an officer.
Yeah, but power is not about being a general. Power is about knowing yourself, and I think that's also something that I always curious to explore. That the characters that go through some kind of like a coming of age experience of learning themselves, and I love writing women, like, but it almost feels to me like they know more. So it's almost like there's less for me to there's less of a journey.
In Hebrew, the film's being released as Atzmaut, independence.
Yeah.
In English, you decided to go with a different title.
Yeah. For
Why?
many reasons. First of all, the name is actually based on the park where some of the film takes place.
Gan Ha'atzmaut.
Yeah, and I love that name because it's a great setup to kind of like show that specific world of the park, and it's a well-known place in Israel. But it also means independence, and independence for me is a very strong and important theme of the film, because the film is about the independence of the personal independence of each of these characters, especially the father, the son, and the mother. So I chose this name, but when we translated it to English, first of all, nobody knows this park. And I think it felt like it could have like some political interpretation. And, I just wanted to avoid it, and it wasn't worth it.
Why did you become a filmmaker?
Do you ask this question to everyone?
Usually not, but it's the perfect question for you.
I mean, there's probably like a lot of reasons. I think, first of all, I remember the day that I decided. And it was at the age of 7, and I went with my father to see Jurassic Park. And I remember that we went out, and I was blown away. And I asked him, like, who did that? Like, because he said, like, there's actors and the special effects, and I said, like, yeah, but who does that? And I don't even think he knew exactly what to tell me. He said, like, there's such a thing called a director. And then I was like, and I told him, like, I think I want to do that. And he said, like, you can, it's not here, it's like in Hollywood. Like, you can, like, and I think that kind of like notion of understanding that, you know, like you always need to look to the US for the...
Certainly when you were a kid, that was the case.
Yeah, but also I think it stayed with me. Something about like that like idea that my father presented to me in the age of 7 of like, oh, you don't make films anywhere else other than Hollywood. I think it stayed with me in a way, and I'm happy it stayed with me because it kept me kind of like, you know, a bit more, you know, because I grew up in a European type of filmmaking system. And the idea that I still had kind of like American dreams in me made me a bit different than I think my colleagues.
Really?
Yeah, I think, you know.
Had you spent a lot of time overseas as a child?
No. I think it was more about thinking about the audience, thinking about selling tickets.
Really?
Which is something you don't think about in like an Israeli, you know, art house type of world. Yeah, and I think it kind of like it became, in a way, a lot of my passion has to do with that idea of how do I take my most, you know, personal struggles and sometimes secrets, and how do I translate that into entertainment, not art, you know? And by that combination, I feel like it might creates the most, you know, interesting art.
And you're not concerned about exposing yourself?
I am. I'm totally conflicted. I'm very brave while making the film. I'm very terrified when it comes out. I'm terrified right now. But I got used to it because it happened to me so many times now that I do something and then I regret doing it because I'm afraid. But if the work is good and if you do it with love, then usually it comes back to you as love. Like, I mean, I think, you know.
Reaching out for those few dollars available to Israeli filmmakers, especially with the changes in the government and some of the funding issues. Is there a sense of competition among filmmakers, or is there a sort of a sense of, you know, good for you, you got that money, I'm with you? What's the community, the film community in Israel like today? Is it a dog-eat-dog situation?
It's such an amazing thing, the Israeli industry. I really, when I look at it from the outside, the amount of talent. Really,
incredible.
The amount of talent and the amount of like minimal resources and the amount of actually friendship that, you know, because everybody knows each other and everybody needs to be each other's friend, jury, you know, because we choose when our colleagues, you know, get funds because we also are part of the you know. So it's really a complicated experience, and I think there is jealousy there and there is competition. But you know, if you give in to jealousy and competition and bitterness, you're not going to survive. So I feel like for me, when I felt those feelings, and received a lot of, no, and a lot of you're not good enough, and everybody goes through that. And I think I realized early on that I have to figure it out with myself of how to approach that tension in that situation. And my approach is to be just very much involved in everybody's work, like to offer my help in a way that is so close and intense and loving, which sometimes people don't like that, but when they allow me, their success becomes my success as well, and it just like it liberates you from comparing yourself, like it's ours.
What a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, I think it's kind of selfish. It's just because I don't want to be that person and I don't want to feel jealousy. So I find ways to, support my friends and be part of it.
The film opens with heavy-duty dancing, and you've decided to sort of have the camera.
What does that mean, heavy-duty dancing?
They're really dancing hard, and especially the way you shot it, sort of from below. Noise and hard music and
they're
people
pogo dancing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the film revolves a lot around water and the pool and the shower and things that are happening. Was that intentional or just?
I think the pool and the water in the film was had a lot to do with just like to find a connection to childhood and to kind of like for me, because the first time we see the father and the son together, they're like brightest and most optimistic moment in the film is them in the water, being free
and the love that you just sensed right up front, and this they just really love each other.
Yeah, and it felt to me like it would be great to use it as a tool, as a reminder of that closeness, and specifically that scene where and I think that's something I found out during shooting, because I always had the idea of that image of like pogo dancing, which is like rock dancing, where people are like pushing towards each other, which I found like a very interesting imagery, because it really made me think about the themes of masculinity and how there's some violent, but there's some need for closeness and some homoerotic imagery in it. And I found that very interesting. And when I saw and when we filmed it with like the slow motion stuff, they actually looked like they were in water.
Yes.
And when I saw that, I thought about the pool, and it kind of like made me connect to that idea that when it will look like they are actually all like jumping inside the pool, we will think about the father, and then the image of the father will reveal itself at the party. And I just found that those images, the pool and the party, connecting images, and kind of like the gate between the past and the present. And I think that's what made me, because we had that scene and the father was supposed to be there, but he was supposed to be dressed differently. And when we saw how it looked, and I started thinking about like the connection, I asked him to wear the things that he wore to the pool. And then in the editing, we use the sound of like water while we see them jumping. So it's those kind of like interesting evolution of ideas that they start as something like very amorphic in the script, and slowly they're like spot on.
I guess my last question is your choice of actors. You have a young man who's absolutely terrific, Yair Mazor, playing the part of Boaz, and you have Asi Cohen, who is a household name in Israel. Mm-hmm. Difficulty getting actors, or after karaoke, everyone wants to work with you?
Honestly, yeah, after karaoke, it was very easy.
Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy, but
And yet, it's not as if karaoke didn't have excellent stars.
Exactly, and I think that more than like, will they work with me? And I say to every filmmaker, because it's a small industry, you can reach for the stars. And I think that for me, working on when I started working on karaoke, it was such a long journey that when I got to the point of making it, I was like, I'm not gonna settle. You know, I need the best. I've worked for 6 years on this. I have like this very clear vision. It's for the whole country to see, you know, and I need the best. And so it was very important for me to first to reach out for the best. And you know, thankfully they agreed, and I got the best. And the same thing happened here. I think, you know, the idea of Asi Cohen, you know, he's like this amazing comedian, probably the most appreciated and loved comedian for years. But at the same time, he's not acting in film.
Right.
I think his last role in a film was like 15 or 20 years ago. And it almost became kind of like this, you know, kind of like a joke. You should send him the script just so he would say no and you could move on, because it's a step you must. And yeah, to my surprise, he was interested. And I think that, giving him the role had a lot to do with finding actually the fact that, you know, comedians are so interested in that sense that they have these like larger than life character, and they wear endless masks, and every time you see Asi Cohen, he's doing like this other crazy character. But when you ask him to, you know, just be like, no masks, like, let me see your face, let me see it naked. It's like very confusing. It's suddenly like, it feels like you don't know what you're seeing. He doesn't know what he's giving you. Like, it's this, and I think that when we were rehearsing, we realized that like, it's really hard to find like the clean version of him. Like, we don't know if it exists. And what was very strong to me is that I realized that there's something in the closeted experience that is very similar, that I remember about myself. You know, just like not feeling free to show who I am. So for other people, it was like I was out of focus, you know? It was like I was constantly out of focus. I was there, I had like personality tropes, but it didn't click. I wasn't like a, how do you say, like a round character. Like I wasn't
whole.
And I thought that would probably be good for not only for the character, but also for a type of character where we most of the films see from the child's perspective and trying to understand what is it, how could it be. So in a way, we kind of like kept that thing throughout the film, and only, I don't want to spoil the film, but only when you get to a point where you are, you know, really getting to know who that person is, that's what we actually worked on. You know, I don't think we rehearsed any other scene other than, I don't want to spoil it, but the scene where he tells him everything, you know? So yeah, and with Yair, who is brilliant, it was really one of those things that, you know, you need to find a terrific child, and it's terrifying. You know, the film could fall apart if you don't find the perfect child. And yeah, he was the first one I saw actually, and I knew that, like, you know, I knew that Spielberg had to see like hundreds of kids for E.T., so I felt like, oh, I should probably do that. And I had like endless auditions, but I kept going back to that first kid. He's just an old soul, and working with him was actually probably one of the easiest things that I had to do in this film.
Terrific acting, and I think it had something to do with the directing too.
Thank you, but you know, really, if you let me now direct like a film only with kids, I'm not sure that I would be any good in that. I think it's just this guy.
The film is called Tell Me Everything. It's a film by Moshe Rosenthal, and look forward to getting many honors as it's out there, just like your previous film. Much success to you.
Thank you so much.
And thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.